Welcome back to Hey Kentucky. On Friday, we aired part one of an interview with former Governor Steve Beshear about his new book. Tonight, we look into part two of the conversation, and it got a little more testy. Take a look. When you were governor, you came on my show a number of times at different forums, and one time you got upset at me when I pressed you on gay marriage. And in the conversations you and I've had at the time, I didn't really understand what your position was. Now, in the book, you say, well, let me ask you, did you always believe that gay marriage was okay? Have you come around on that? Did it change? Because when I asked you the question at the time, you would not say you were for it. What has changed?
I've been in a lifetime evolution on an issue like that. I was born in the 1940s in rural America. And the phrase gay marriage wasn't even on the radar screen.
Probably not.
I mean, you know, nobody even thought about that kind of thing. And so fast forward to today, entirely different environment today. And my thought process and my learning experiences and my life experiences all along the way finally brought me to the stage at a point after I was governor to where I just honestly felt, you know, if two people love each other, then they ought to be able to spend their lives together no matter what their gender is, and they ought to have whatever legal protections that people
So it changed while you were governor?
It changed while I was governor. At the same time, though, this issue had just bubbled to the top in terms of all of these lawsuits all across the country. And there wasn't anything more pressing for this issue than to get it decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, because you were getting all kinds of decisions every place. And this country needed to kind of be brought together one way or the other, get it over with, let's have a decision so that we can all move on. I knew, because, I mean, Kentucky voted for a constitutional amendment just about 10 or 12 years ago where about 75% of the people voted against gay marriage, basically. And I knew that if that case that we had in Kentucky stopped at the trial court level, that Kentuckians weren't going to be satisfied with that. They wanted to have their day in court. And I felt like that they would be more accepting of whatever outcome that it was going to be if it went all the way to the Supreme Court. So I pushed it there. It came out. I think it came out right, honestly. And I know a lot of people still disagree with that decision, but I think a lot of people now feel like, well, it's over, and it's time to move on.
Now, I want to ask you about health care for a second, because it's obviously the number one topic that people talk about. You created on the state level probably the most successful at the time of the Obamacare implementation strategies. It has been not dismantled yet, but I'm sure the governor would like to dismantle it. Now that it's been in action for however many years, are there things that need to be fixed, even in Kentucky? If so, what? And what's the future for health care in Kentucky?
Well, first of all, we implemented the Affordable Care Act for one reason, because our people desperately needed health care. I mean, we were the least healthiest state in the country, and you're never going to be one of the leading states in this country until your people are healthy. You're not going to have a productive workforce unless it's a healthy workforce. So when the Affordable Care Act came along, whether you liked it or not, it was the one opportunity we probably were ever going to have to provide accessible and affordable health care for everybody for the first time. And so I grabbed hold of it. I charged ahead, and we were very aggressive. We implemented it, and it was wildly successful. I mean, in 18 months, we went from over 20% uninsured to about 6% uninsured.
It was, I completely agree with you, it was successful in getting people enrolled. Is the cost going to be too much for the state?
No. Because every study that's been done, I commissioned 2 independent studies by PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte. Then there's been about 4 other studies done. They all conclude the same thing. It's affordable, and it's sustainable. And then the folks that don't like it just keep saying, well, it's not affordable. We can't afford it. They don't have a fact to go on.
So you say that when BEVIN or people like BEVIN who say this costs too much, you just think that's false?
Well, it's false because they don't have anything to go on. Ask them the evidence they have for that. We've got a mountain.
They don't come on the show.
That's right. We've got a ton of evidence that says that not only is this affordable, it's creating jobs in this state right now. So both from, to me, a moral standpoint of providing health care for people and an economic standpoint, it's wildly successful. Now, are there issues with the Affordable Care Act? Yes. And we need to fix those flaws. One thing is with small businesses. You know, your entrepreneur, your 2 or 3 person operation, this is great for them because they can get coverage they never had.
Yeah.
If you get up to, 25, 30, 50 and all of that, then it gets kind of unwieldy for
Yes, it
small
does.
business, and we need to do something about that. There are folks just outside the subsidy level whose premiums are too
Who
high.
make just a little bit too much to get subsidies,
subsidies.
but that their costs have gone up.
That's right,
Yeah.
and we need to address that. So those are real issues that need to be addressed, but you don't address them by throwing the whole thing out
Gotcha.
like the baby with the bathwater.
One more question before you go. You're also, in addition to a former governor, a dad, okay? And your son is the attorney general, and your son has kind of become sort of on the front lines of a lot of issues with the governor because he's the one Democrat, one of 2 Democrats in the executive branch. When you see him being criticized, is it harder than when you were criticized as governor?
Well, sure. I mean, you get a thick skin when it's you. Now, when it's your son, when it's a member of your family, it's a lot harder to take. But let me just say this. Number one, obviously I'm biased, but I think Andy's doing a heck of a job as Attorney General. Number 2, he has not been in 2 or 3 arguments with the governor because he's a Democrat. He's been in arguments because he feels like the governor has abused his power in some way. And the courts have stood with him on that. They've stood with Andy because,
Do you feel like the governor's abused his power?
well, sure, when he cut $18 million out of higher education without any legislative action, Andy took him to court over that because Andy felt like he didn't have the authority to do that. The Kentucky Supreme Court agreed with Andy. They said, Governor, you don't have the power to do that, and $18 million went back to our universities. So those are the only times that Andy is in a fight with the governor, is when he feels like the governor's done something wrong, and Andy, as Attorney General, is the lawyer for the people. If he doesn't stand up, who's going to stand up?
There you go. Well, former Governor Beshear's People Over Politics. Very interesting read. Thank you very much. You
You're
have
welcome.
always come on anytime we've asked, and I very much appreciate it. We're going to take a break and be right back. This is Hey Kentucky.